So at the beginning of 2025, I tested the BMW M4 GT3 Evo in Dubai. I did a video on it, you may have seen that already. Now, despite the fact this is a GT3, it felt completely different to the McLaren 720S GT3 Evo I've raced in previous years. And so in this video, we'll be touching on what those differences are. In both cars, I tested using the Pirelli tyre they use in GT World Challenge, so it's a fair test in that respect. I do feel some of the differences are reflected quite well in the sim as well, so we'll talk about that in a bit. So sit back, relax, let's get into it. So we're going to start off looking at the strengths and weaknesses of both cars, and they're quite different for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they're built completely differently by the respective manufacturers, and the balance of performance is going to be different for each car in each championship, so that's why the strengths and weaknesses will be different in the first place. So in GT World Challenge, where I've raced, generally speaking, the BMW's strengths are its straight line speed, its performance in high-speed corners, and its ability to ride bumps and curbs is quite good. The main weaknesses would be its performance in low grip situations, its braking performance, and drivability. So I felt like it was quite a hard car to extract the time from. It wasn't the most natural driving style to get that little bit, that final couple of tenths I found. So the McLaren's main strengths would be its performance under braking and its high-speed cornering. Its weaknesses, though, would be its straight-line speed, its ability to ride bumps and curbs, along with its reliability. So yeah, I'd say overall the BMW is a stronger car, hence why they've probably won more races in GT World Challenge in recent years. But yeah, these strengths and weaknesses change year on year as the manufacturers bring updates to the cars, and naturally the BOP will change as a result of that, so each car will change a lot over time. For example, the original McLaren 720S GT3 before the Evo 2 or 3 years ago was the quickest GT3 in a straight line in GT World Challenge, whereas the Evo, with all the updates and the changes to the BOP, is probably, if not the slowest, it's definitely one of the slowest. So that's a good example of how things can change very suddenly. As soon as you update a car, its strengths and weaknesses will change immediately. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the car balance, and from a driver's point of view, the biggest difference in this entire video would be the balance between the two cars. But before we get into it, just good context to have, in the BMW at the Dubai test, the team after the test found that the rear left damper had completely seized, so I think 2 of the 3 runs I had, the damper wasn't working at all. So it's good context to have, and it's safe to say I've got much more mileage in the McLaren. Now, in order to test the BMW earlier this year, I had to travel all the way to Dubai. And I know a lot of you will have your own travel plans this year in 2025, and there is one app you need to download, and that app is called Saily. Saily's a brand new eSIM service app, and what it does is it gives you a local SIM card whenever you're traveling, so you don't have to pay those crazy roaming fees. They have eSIM plans for over 190 different countries within 8 different regions, so it's very likely wherever you're going, Saily's going to be able to keep you connected. All you got to do is click on the link in the description, and you can download the app for iOS and Android. Then you can buy your plan, whichever one suits you best, of course. And then all you need to do is install the eSIM on your phone. And then, yeah, when you land, you just need to activate the SIM and away you go. The good thing about Saily is you only need to install the eSIM once, so it saves you the faff of installing a new eSIM for each individual country, which, to be honest, has put me off getting an eSIM in the past. And yeah, when I went to Dubai for the BMW test, one thing I loved about my Saily eSIM was the fact that the internet speed was quicker than the hotel Wi-Fi. So when I was trying to do data analysis in the evenings or uploading my YouTube video for that week, it was just way more efficient because of my eSIM. So yeah, that was a big lifesaver. Right then, guys, if this sounds like it's a bit of you, click on the link in the description below and get Saily downloaded before your next trip away. Make sure you use the code JAMES to get a banging exclusive 15% discount, or scan the QR code on the screen right now. And yes, a big thank you to Saily for sponsoring the video. Let's get back to it. Moving from the McLaren then, where the engine is pretty much mounted in the rear. I know it's mid-engine, but it's closer to the rear than it is the front, versus the BMW where the engine is completely in the front. My God, like, I really underestimated how different that would feel. And so to try to explain it, so if we think of the 3 stages of a corner, so the entry, the apex, and the exit, the McLaren would be nervous on the rear on the entry phase, the balance would be quite neutral, and it would rotate quite nicely mid-corner, and then on exit, it would be a little bit rear limited on traction. And so if we compare that with the BMW, so the BMW would feel quite neutral an entry, so quite stable, but quite nice. Lots of understeer mid-corner, and then like the McLaren, it would be a little bit rear limited on traction. So the exit phase is quite similar in both cars, however the lead up to the exit is very, very different. So with the McLaren, to extract the lap time from the car, you would brake quite early, the car would rotate mid-corner, and then that's how you get a good exit. So in other words, you back it up, slow in, fast out. in the BMW, if you did this, it wouldn't work because of that inherent mid-corner understeer. And so to try and drive around that, you have to attack the entry of the corner quite hard, which you can do because the balance on entry is really nice. And then you have to generate that rotation with your braking, so trail braking. And yeah, so these differences purely stem from the fact that the engine weight is distributed at different places. So in the BMW, the fronts will be generating more grip as the engine is sat over the front axle, and it'll be almost the opposite in the McLaren. And so the interesting thing here is I've experienced this same transition moving from the McLaren to the Mercedes on the Circuit Corsa Competizione. And so the OGs of this channel will remember how much I drove the McLaren on ACC back in the day, winning all of my SRO esports championships in that car. And so when I joined the Mercedes esports team at the beginning of 2023 and started driving the front engine Merc, this was the key thing I had to change. Smooth and precise trail braking was the key to being fast in a front engine car, as that's the only way you could get it to rotate. And so I've got a good example to show you on a Circuit Corsa Competizione using the McLaren and the BMW at Paul Ricard turn 12, which I thought was a really good corner to showcase these differences in driving technique, as it's quite a long corner. So yeah, using ACC along with RaceMake, which is, for those who don't know, a telemetry visualization software which I've helped develop. I did a video on it a few months ago showing basically what RaceMate can do and what it can show you as a driver to help you improve. But if we look through this example, so you can see the McLaren's in green and the BMW is in white, and you can see the brake trace a couple channels below, as well as obviously the cars on the racing line. And you can see on the brakes, in the BMW we brake slightly later, so we're pushing the entry harder, we're on the brake for longer, and we're trail braking deeper into the corner with a different line as well. You have to take a slightly different line with the difference in braking technique, and then back on power. So if we look at that again, you can see in the McLaren there's a bigger coasting phase, so there's a bigger phase between coming off the brake and going back on power, whereas in the BMW it's a smaller coasting phase. So as soon as you're off the brake, you're pretty much thinking, right, let's creep the power back up now. And so another way to describe it, looking at this, you can basically say the BMW, you're V'ing it off more. So you're going in harder, rotating on the brakes, getting it straight, and then squirting off the corner. Whereas in the McLaren, you're backing it up, brake early, let the car rotate whilst coasting, then get back on power. So this is quite an extreme example. It's not always this different, but it's a good example to show you what the differences are. So yeah, next we'll talk about cockpit functionality. So I'd say the BMW is a nicer place to be when driving the car. There's a couple of features it had which I really liked, such as aircon. This was an absolute game changer. So I was doing fairly long stints around Dubai in quite hot temps, and I barely broke a sweat, which was very nice. In the McLaren, you just have air cooling. So where the aircon vents would be in a road car, they're not aircon, it's just air coming through as airflow. And sometimes little bits sneak its way through, like gravel or little bits of rubber. They do sometimes flick through and then end up, hitting your helmet, or if you're really unlucky, hitting you in the face, which has actually happened before. The BMW also had an E-clutch, so this made pulling away a lot easier out of the pit box. In the McLaren, you have a clutch pedal, so like in your old school road car, where if you didn't quite give it enough throttle or enough clutch slip, you would stall, which in a high pressure pit stop is one more thing you don't really want to be worrying about. In the BMW, you have two clutch paddles underneath the shifter paddles on the wheel, and you simply give the car some throttle and then release one of those clutch paddles, and the E-clutch does the rest. So it's basically impossible to stall, and you do get 9 times out of 10 a very good getaway as well. So yeah, that's pretty nice. And the other thing as well, so the BMW has stronger power steering than the McLaren. This made it much easier to drive. I mean, in sim racing terms, just it felt like there was less force feedback, but it did feel more numb than the McLaren, which I wouldn't say is a good thing. Although it's easier physically, you couldn't feel as much in terms of detail about the road underneath you. And yeah, so there were some other differences as well. So I felt like in the BMW, you had to be way more sensitive on the pedals whilst driving. So I think the reason for this was because of the weight transfer and how much the car reacted to certain loads. So the way the car would pitch, the way the car would roll. As I say, the weight transfer was much more noticeable in the BMW. So if you didn't respect this on the pedals, the car would start behaving quite badly and then you would just go slower. So I think, yeah, to summarize that, it was very easy to overdrive the BMW. So yeah, next thing, the ABS system in the McLaren, I think, was slightly better than the BMW. So being in the BMW's ABS too much would significantly reduce the braking performance, more so than in the McLaren. So yeah, you did not want to be in the ABS pretty much at all in the Beamer, to be honest. This meant slightly less peak brake pressure from the driver's point of view, which again is another reason I found the BMW physically easier to drive, along with the other reasons we mentioned. You just simply wouldn't hit the brakes as hard, so you wouldn't have to put as much energy into that left foot in a braking zone. So as well as all that, driver changes would be significantly easier in the BMW simply because of the door. So it has a normal, you could say, road car door, whereas in the McLaren they've got a super cool gull wing style door that comes up and almost takes your head off as you open it. But in the event of a time sensitive pit stop, I do think it's a bit of a faff the way the door comes up, and then you have to sort of sneak underneath it and squeeze yourself into this very small hole for the cockpit. That, along with the E-clutch difference we mentioned earlier, I think pit stops in the BMW, not that I've done one yet, I think they would be a lot easier. So the way the cars behave in dirty air is quite different. So the McLaren, you generally get quite a lot of push, so understeer, especially in the medium and high speed corners. You really feel the front, it just would not turn. And yeah, in the BMW it was sort of the opposite, so I felt like every time I did come up behind another car, especially in the medium and high speed, the rear would just go a bit loose. Again, with the engine being mounted on the different axles, that would sort of make sense. But yeah, it was definitely a surprise. Of course, the final difference, and I had to get this in there, the BMW uses a sim racing steering wheel that you can actually buy for your sim rig. And yeah, obviously the McLaren doesn't have a sim racing wheel. So to summarise, I think although both cars are GT3s, as we've covered in this video, they are very, very different. So I think in this current point in time, the McLaren suits me a bit better, just my sim racery driving style, you know, slow in, fast out, lots of coasting in the middle of the corner. At least I know for me at the minute, it comes more naturally driving like that. However, what we also know now is that the sim can train me to be better in a BMW or any front engine car. So we've discovered it simulates a lot of the differences we've talked about in this video, which I think is a really cool thing to know. Like, the sim is an unbelievable tool to have if you're training to become a racing driver, or if you want to become a better racing driver. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below, which car do you guys prefer, the McLaren or the BMW, and also say why. I'm intrigued to see some of those comments below. And final thing then, it's amazing despite all these differences when it comes to qualifying, and you know, everyone's turned all the power up, everyone's going hell for leather, they're always split within a few tenths. When you consider how different the cars are, they're made and manufactured in completely different places. Obviously they have regs to stick to and stuff. It is mad how close they are when it comes down to it. They're pretty damn close performance-wise. But yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you next time.